Before we get into today's video, we have a brief heads up from our partners at the SOJOURN audio drama, who have recently released a previously Patreon exclusive anthology short to their YouTube channel. You can find a link to listen to it in the description and pinned comment below. Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm Hujuana and today I'm going to run through the ships from the main factions in the Orville and give them an informal ranking from worst to best. I'm not going to include random background ships from the show's title sequence or that showed up like one time, or those from the comics because I haven't read those, or the Spirit of Fire which is in the first episode just vibing with the white paint job. Before we start though, there are going to be spoilers for the show, so if you haven't watched it yet, be warned. You really should watch it though. Yes, season 1 is derivative and has utterly painful forced-in jokes, but it really picks up in season 2 and becomes absolutely incredible in season 3. We start at my least favourite ship, which is the two Moclan cruisers because, well, they're ugly. They're both overly smooth. The fins for the drive out the back don't really accentuate their shape, just exaggerate their slug-like form. If that's what the goal was, then top marks because they're both big, unappealing blobs. At least they look better in motion though, and the greebly detail area inside the drive fins is pretty nice. The Moclan shuttle is a bit better because it actually has some shape to it, but it's still pretty unremarkable except for the bad visibility on the windows and the 3D topology lines on the side. Their best ship is the Fighter, which may be my favourite out of the dedicated fighters across the show. It's big, it's chunky, it feels like a powerful heavy fighter, and it actually has a design to it. Huzzah, Moclus, you made something that looks decent. The next faction is the Krill, starting with their main ship, the big boy, the mean, green, religious machine. A very okay design whose best feature is the weapons turret underslung on its chin, very practical. It's also interesting that the Krill carry children on their ships like the Union does. At least on that one ship, even when the vessel is blatantly on a mission of war. Gotta show the little uns what the family business is, I suppose. The elephant in the room with the Krill ships is that the shuttle is, well, the same. It's bizarre, but I think rather than the shuttle being a copy of the big ship, it's the other way around, as there was pre-release marketing with a different cruiser design. Very odd all around, but I think the design is better as a shuttle than as a capital ship. The other Krill design is their Fighter, which is almost great. It seems like it's a decent size, and it's aggressive looking, but man oh man, why are the weapon spar thingies angled downwards? They just make it look unbalanced and like it's flying in the wrong direction. I wish they faced forward, it would look so much nicer in motion. The next faction is the Kaylon and their ship, or ships. Is it one? Is it two? I don't know, but I don't particularly like their larger cruiser. It's mostly empty space, and as it attaches to the crewed part, it just feels like an accessory rather than a ship in and of itself. It is appropriately menacing though, and the weapon it uses is really cool. I do enjoy seeing beams, and it's rare for them to be fired for short periods of time rather than being big, continuous ones. Another bonus to the big ship is that unlike every other civilization, the Kaylon realize you can turn around and fire backwards. They truly are very advanced. As an aside, it's nice to see the relative velocity of wreckage and disabled ships in these shots from the Battle of Earth. The VFX artists did a fantastic job there. The other Kaylon ship, or the actual ship, or whatever it is, I much prefer. Though I can't decide if its tactic of ramming its enemies is genius or not. On one hand, the Kaylon don't care about death that much, and they can punch right through a target, and on the other, their weapons are really strong, so why bother ramming? Another solid plus towards my liking it, just as you should like this video, is that it's basically an Oculus from Mass Effect. And now we have arrived at the Planetary Union, who have the best looking vessels in the show by far. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the Heavy Cruiser, also known as the Leviathan class, which is an absolutely gorgeous ship that is sadly not seen all that much. Despite being much bigger than the other main ships of the Union, it looks a lot more refined. It feels like the surface detail of this is what the Orville Season 3 revamp was based on, but that ship comes later. Even the quantum drive things are more polished up. The entire ship in general feels really businesslike and functional, which does fit their apparent role as big hitters used for battles and heavy escorts escort and such. I just wish they were shown as being a bit more badass, or just doing more in general, because as it is, they're often just window dressing. One downside of the heavy cruiser is that having 3 stacked shuttle bays on their aft looks a bit odd, but does sell the size of the ship compared to its friendlier siblings. Maybe just having the 2 hangars would have looked better? I don't know, gotta launch all those shuttles and fighters somehow, I guess. And I don't have that much to say about the 2 Union shuttle designs. The first one is kinda cute and goofy looking with its teeny tiny engine rings. Overall, it's a perfectly serviceable, if quaint, design. I will note though that it reminds me a lot of the puddle jumper from Stargate Atlantis. Both have the divided up crew section and same general layout, and both have a cloak system as well. There's nothing wrong with this, the puddle jumper is great! The Season 3 shuttle is a weird one though, as it has a completely different aesthetic to pretty much every other Union ship. The drive coils are different, the hull is these blocky elements with hard edges, and the canopy is just awful. Yeah, it's massive and cinematic as hell from inside, but it just looks so cheap. It's like a homemade greenhouse and spoils what is otherwise a great revamp. Backing up the shuttles is the Union Fighter, or the Pterodon, or whatever it's called. I was going to say it looked kinda nice, apart from the 2 engine coils being lined up with each other, but then I realised it's just a woman's shoe. It's also ridiculously tiny, and the first time it's properly shown, it's put up against what I think are far more practical space fighters, those little drone thingies that are remote controlled and can fire in any direction. And before you say they lost that fight, they were also against the best pilot in the entire fleet. Remember when I said there wouldn't be random single appearance ships?
I lied.
I have 3 to talk about, like the Kaylon ships from the 2nd episode of the show. There's a few designs of them and they only show up briefly, but I like the horizontal rings that seems to be their drive system. Overall, the show does a really good job of giving everyone their own quantum drive style that's pretty unique and adds a bit of variety to things. I also like the Navarian ships from that dodgy pheromone episode. I kinda hated that episode, but these ships were neat, an elegant and sleek design. They remind me of something from Endless Space 2, but nothing terribly specific, it just has that sort of vibe. The last random ship I want to briefly call out is the Kandarian ship, which is seen for like 5 seconds, but it's very pretty, especially with the reflections from the planet below. Back to the main ships now, and my favourite 2 craft from the show are of course the Orville itself, which is a boringly named Explorer class, and the very similar Science class. It's appropriately sized. It actually feels like it could be a proper vessel at this scale, albeit a small one with a small amount of crew that all gets to know each other. Yeah, there's still faceless randoms about, but they don't feel like they're total nobodies. Interestingly, the first 2 seasons used a physical model for the ship, which was copied to CGI for more complex shots. While this is a cool idea and harkens back to older sci-fi, I'm not sure this was a good use of a physical prop, unlike what The Mandalorian did with the Razor Crest and Gideon's Cruiser. Those 2 are great models, but the sort of low-budget cheesiness of the early seasons did not do the Orville's one any favours. In Season 3 though, it got a full transformation with a brand spanking new CG model with a ton of detail and much nicer materials. I mean, look at it, it's gorgeous! The interior underwent a massive glow up as well, from the much more impressive reactor core to the extra stuff on the bridge. The single greatest feature of the ship though is the quantum drive. The swooping arcs of the spatial tensor coils, or whatever they are gorgeous, though they must be a pain to fly through with the shuttles. The best part about the drive though is the sound design. That build-up and whip crack, especially in the earlier seasons, is just so utterly satisfying. One section of the design that I'm not sure if I like though is the bulging out part that encompasses the shuttle bay, as it kinda messes with the flow of the main hull of the ship, at least from some angles. But it does allow the weapons to stem off from the front of the lower arc of the engines, which is cool. But those weapons, oh man, they are so boring and uninspired. Just these pathetic little bolts of energy, and the combat generally just being fighter style but bigger is totally yawn-worthy. The battles in the show were often also too big and messy overall. Just an absolute furball with stuff everywhere, which is honestly probably what the combat would end up being with the type of weapons everyone seems to use. Which leaves my absolute favourite ship from the Orville, the Science class, because it's pretty much an Explorer class without the part I find ugly. That lack of sticky out shuttle bay on the back of the hull and the different quantum ring arrangement makes the ship just better looking in my opinion. It would be a lot smaller inside though, thanks to having to adjust the interior space to accommodate the shuttle bay directly. But that's worth it, and they would have the same small ship vibes that you get from Mass Effect or on the Nova or Defiant, or more appropriately, the Miranda class, which is probably a more apt comparison as they both spend a lot of time exploding. If you've seen the show, drop a comment to let me know which ship is your favourite. And if you haven't seen the show, go watch it, it's good! Also, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already to get more content like this, and if you really want to support Spacedock more directly, you can do so by becoming a YouTube channel member, by giving us super thanks, or by joining our Patreon. Thank you for watching and supporting us, and I'll see you next time.
Stop exploding, you coward!